Good morning, everyone. I'm Myron Hrycyk. You can see my position up there, Interim CIO. I was the Group CIO at Severn Trent, a FTSE 100 for about 7 to 8 years, in IT for a number of years before that. And I was invited to deliver the introduction to today and then chair the panel that we'll be holding next. Just by way of an introduction, first of all, welcome today to GBI Events' second CIO CMO event. And looking through the agenda, and it is a packed agenda today, it's going to be a fascinating day of discussions, debates, and some really good networking. And it's really good to see both CMO and CIOs in the same vicinity to share ideas. I'm a career CIO. And in the early 2000s, I decided I'd do an MBA. And there was 8 modules. One of them was the marketing module. And you know what? I discovered I was a frustrated marketing director. I kind of went into the module thinking, oh, this is going to be easy. But actually, I came out of it really impressed with some of the structures, the strategies, and that combination of creativity that our marketing colleagues have to deliver our strategies and our marketing plans. I then returned back to my day job, and I got involved in ERPs and things like that, and networks. And then more recently, like most of the CIOs in this room, I got involved in digital. And I continue to get asked, so what is digital and why is it important as a CIO? For me, digital has re-energized IT. I think we've got very back office from an IT perspective. And the fact that our CEOs and our marketing colleagues see digital as something that can really drive the business forward has made technology exciting again, particularly for the new generation of people coming into business. And really, IT is very good at creating buzzwords. And now we've got a new buzzword, and actually bringing marketing together and IT. That's a powerful combination for making buzzwords. It really is. So not only have we got fintech, we've now got Martech. And I know that's what you're here to listen about today. And I was looking at some of the buzzwords that we've now created for Martech. So I think we're going to learn about search engine optimization, bounce rates, if any of you know what bounce rates are, that's going to feature, I think. Dwell rates, dwell time, remarketing, that was a good one. And I'm sure you'll pick up on that. Web analytics, IP tags, and all sorts of things. So there's a whole raft of new ideas, new areas to explore that actually is driving businesses forward. And certainly, as someone who's been in IT for 30 years, I can honestly say over the last couple of years, the buzz that digital has driven has really disrupted not only the business, it's disrupted internal IT departments, it's even disrupted marketing, and it's also disrupted the suppliers to our businesses. Gartner survey in 2016-2017 on CMO spend. For those of you that maybe haven't seen that, marketing budgets are increasing. The survey shows 11 to 12%. 27% of marketing budget is earmarked to technology. And actually, it's almost as much as companies now spend on IT. So what we're seeing is a dramatic transformation of spend in IT, the thrust of what we're doing in marketing, and a whole change in the way our business deals with customers. And I guess that's one of the key things that I've seen in that Martech, digital technology, and the coming together of these things brings together technology, and it really has a customer-facing angle, so customer journeys and those sorts of things. Just before we kick off the day, just a few things. If I could, on behalf of the event organisers, just ask attendees to stick to the itinerary. I was looking at the schedule, it's kind of back-to-back meetings and back-to-back presentations. So if I could just invite you to just keep to schedule so that we can make sure we get through the day at the correct pace. Also, there are Twitter hashtags. A conference isn't a conference without Twitter hashtags, is it? So you've got hashtag CIO event and hashtag CMO event to put your comments on as the day progresses. Bit of health and safety. Fire exits, there's no fire alarm today, but the fire exits are well signed. I can see one from here. It's straight out of that door there and up the stairs. We've got some lunch that's being prepared, and that will be outside during the lunch break during midday. And for all of us that have endured the conference and exhausted by all of the input we're going to be received, there's drinks and canapes at the end. So I think we can look forward to that. And just one final thing. I think we might all remember where we were the day that the Americans voted anew their 45th president in. I must say, it makes me wonder just how good our pollsters are and how good our predicting of events are, because I think it's a total surprise. So, just to say that one of our esteemed panel members, unfortunately, he was so shocked, he hasn't been able to quite make it in at the moment. So Tom is still making his way in by taxi, so we're down to 3. So, just to say, welcome, have a great day, a great event, and I'm now going to move on to chair the panel. There is a roving mic as we go through towards the back end of the panel, so I would like to get some questions from the audience and then stimulate some more questions.
Just suggesting you
embarrass I can see it. Do come through. Do come through. Yeah, there's quite a few seats out here, guys, if you want to just get through. Excellent. Okay. Still a few more on here. Okay. Yeah, plenty of seats. Okay. Feel free to make your way across as we kick off. So, let's just kick into the panel. By way of introduction, I've introduced myself. I'd just like the panellists to introduce themselves first of all. So, DT.
Good morning, everybody. My name is DT. I work for Ascot Racecourse, and I've been there for the last 18 months. During that time, the head of marketing and myself have been working together nearly daily, looking at ways to improve our customer journey and our guest experiences. And it has definitely been one of the most rewarding times of my life, working that close with customers and guests and see the amount of enjoyment and satisfaction they get out of the digital experience at Ascot.
Welcome, DT.
Good morning, everybody. My name is variously Charlie, Chaz and Chris, depending on which piece of the agenda I work for. And apparently I work for a boutique small American coffee that you've never heard of, otherwise known as the Met Office. So apologies for the spelling. Probably my fault somewhere along the line. So I work for the Met Office. These days, hardcore IT. About as technical as you can describe the CIO role. So I'm Director of Technology as well as the CIO, but I have a background which is very different, which I may come back to as part of the qualification for some of my answers a bit later on, but certainly 20 years in the private sector before the 8 years that I've currently had in the public sector.
Thanks, Charles.
Good morning, my name is John Gelgart. I should say Dajahao. I actually spend most of my time in China. I'm responsible for the interests of Grant Thornton International in Greater China. So I actually live in Beijing, so I've come here yesterday, flew yesterday into the conference. Clearly a Chinese perspective is somewhat different, I spent most of my life prior to the role I have now. I was the Global Marketing Director for Grant Thornton and rebranded that organization globally. Prior to that, worked in PwC as a marketing consultant and had my own agency prior to that. So really, what I'm bringing today is a very, very different world to you. And I will be talking about China, work with people at Alibaba, work with a whole variety of organizations where IT is already part of the marketing mix. So I'm sure you've heard of Weixin, WeChat, where you can do everything you like online. And the Chinese would say to you, you are too slow. You are too slow. Catch up. And that's what I'll be covering today.
Okay, thank you, John. And John, can I start with you? Because I think you started to address the first question I really want to put to the panel, and that is, Martech, the blending of marketing and technology, is now becoming part of our vocabulary. John, how would you describe the impact and the change it's driving in your company and sector?
Well, I happen to work for a bunch of accountants, which now you've seen the film, of course, you now know we're actually a very, very different breed of people, that we're as good at fighting in the streets as we are at fighting in the boardrooms. But don't believe everything that Ben Affleck can do is indicative of our abilities. But I'm a marketeer, so that's my history. The whole issue about Martech is it's now arrived. You can't avoid it. So I think that the particular challenge I put out is how at the board level do you bring as a CIO and a CMO that wealth of expertise and understanding, and how do you blend it appropriately for the benefit of the business? All too long, I think we've seen both CIOs and CMOs so almost taking a back seat, almost being slightly apologetic about what they do. That time has gone, I think. And certainly in China and in our organization, it's a fully integrated approach. So we have a blended approach, obviously all in Chinese, to the way we address our customer base. The fastest, most efficient way is Weixing. If you've never seen it, come and see me. I've got it. My daily life is online. It's a 24/7 operation. And the very fact that we can do everything from run events, interact with customers, get customers to pay even, using online tools, is a huge issue. Cybersecurity, though, is the key to this. Not least because of China, but cybersecurity is the bête noire sitting behind and underneath all the integration activity around marketing and IT. So I would say it's happening, it's here, and we're seeing a huge change, and it's happening so fast, it's difficult to keep up.
Right, Steve. Charlie, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, sure. So fundamentally, I think agree with John in so much the world's changing, it's changing rapidly, but we're not changing fast enough. But one of the characteristics that we see is that the old command and control structures of pay and rations equals accountability and responsibility and races. Of course, we all have to work for somebody, right? We all have to get paid by somebody, we all have to be kept to account at times by somebody. So those things are not entirely unimportant. But in terms of achieving business outcomes, they're not as important as they were, and they're less effective and efficient than they were. So this notion of, I think John used the term blended capabilities or something. We use the term multidisciplinary teams. So, you know, is it marketing, is it comms, is it technology? Who cares, frankly? It's increasingly about identifying business problems and putting together the right mix of skills and experience to solve those problems. So the old departmental battles, and I still see them, not at my organisation, of course, we're much more liberal than that, but in maybe some non-exec positions and some consulting work that I do, you do still see bun fights, the old territory wars between budgets in IT and budgets in marketing and who has the right to do what, and you certainly see that, but I see it less and less, and I see it certainly less and less at successful and progressive organisations, which have moved on really. Yes, I happen to work for IT. Does that mean I've got nothing to say about how we deal with customers? Well, of course not. Does a logical and analytical set of skills bases, not that marketing, of course, are fluffy creatives, but does that have a role to play in modern marketing, where things like search engine optimization and things that are intrinsically quite technology or at least analytically skills based? Would you expect we all know what I'm not being offensive to anybody. Hopefully, we've all worked with or for marketing organisations that are just purely creative and full of good ideas. Nothing wrong with that, but that's not the only set of skills anymore. Coming up with great ideas about how to brand things and communicate things just isn't all of the skills required to do marketing. So the short answer, I suppose, is I really don't get caught up too much in how marketing or technology has to change. For me, it's a step back, and it's really some fundamental questioning of the primitives of how organisations go about in the commercial world realising commercial value. In my case, making sure that I'm doing the best for the UK. But in both instances, it really is about not being so obsessed with paying rations and much more obsessed about solving problems that are going to improve customer experience ultimately.
Thank you, John. I mean, DT, with Ascot and obviously the main event there, etc. How is Martech and affecting and impacting your role?
Quite a lot. Everything that they want to do would come through to us. We manage all the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure for them, and we have to fit in with whatever they design, whatever they want to do. We have to give them our knowledge and experiences on choosing partners, working across the whole organisation to make sure that whatever they plan and want to push out digitally can be achieved.
Are you working much closer now with the marketing of Ascot Racecourse and the places there, the events there?
Yeah, we do. We sort of stumbled into working closer together from a need. The marketing department was not that technical, and I'm not that marketing orientated. But we got together, and we've been doing that for at least 18 months now.
Another thought that came to mind is that often IT, maybe by marketing, is seen as a little more cautious, a little slower, maybe wants to think about the wider things, whereas marketing wants to be more rapid and catch that moment, etc. John, just to you, do the marketing department see IT possibly as a hurdle in the way, maybe a little too cautious about things? You mentioned security or that sort of thing. Is that still a problem?
No. I think that we...
I'm heartened by that.
Yeah, no, well, maybe we're just odd. Well, I think we are definitely odd. We are definitely odd as an organisation, and indeed, if you talk to any of the larger accounting firms and the law firms as well, you'll find that we're all odd. But we're odd because there's no alternative anymore for us to work together. The imperative to be able to deliver, obviously we're buying and selling companies, we're doing audited accounts, we're doing international tax work, everything, and I mean pretty well everything is online and digitized and outsourced to various places, and so we actually have to work together. We have no choice, and currently working with the global CIO on cybersecurity, and clearly whilst China is different. Nevertheless, they're not trying to find ways of not doing things. We're trying to find ways of doing things to enable us to be able to be absolutely cyber secure, and increasingly that's a requirement of RFPs, proposal opportunities for us to talk and work with large integrated organizations. They expect us to be cyber secure. They expect us to be able to, as part of our pitches, as part of the approach we have as an organization, as a brand, to be able to assure them of IT security, to be able to assure them that their data is in the right place at the right time, to be able to assure them that the way we work with them is fully integrated. So we have no choice, because consumer demand, you guys are often our consumers and our customers, you are demanding a very different way of looking at things. So what I would say is that I feel very strongly about this, that I think IT and marketing has to be working together more effectively, and we have to step forward into this new world, because otherwise it's going to be done to us. And that's never a good place to be. It's never a good place to have the CEO telling you that you need to do. You should be advising the CEOs, this is where we're going.
Thank you, Charles, your thoughts on the kind of maybe the characteristics of these two business functions having to come together?
Okay, so having left the audience with the view that the Met Office is entirely unstructured and doesn't have any, it's a bit of reality, I suppose. So I've talked about the importance of multidisciplinary teams. We happen to have gone quite heavily down the kind of Scrum and Spotify scalability model. We use that structure not just to deliver IT, but to deliver outcomes. And one of the key things that those teams do very, very early on in a program, project, piece of work is to really work out the dynamics of what they're being asked to do. And it comes back to, for those of you, the IT people, you know what I'm referring to when I talk about the iron triangle. But for those of us that aren't into that kind of thing, fast, good, cheap, pick any two of the three, but you can't have all three, is the essence of that conversation. Now that's a bit unfair, because obviously the world around us demands fast, good and cheap all at the same time. So there's a degree to which you are trying to deliver all three. But what I really mean by using that as a kind of primitive or structure through which to look at problems, you can begin to identify actually where your priorities are for the business. Is delivering something on a date within a budget more important than delivering a specific thing or outcome? Sometimes that's the case, and sometimes that isn't the case. So I think, again, we can get into the vendor-led, simplistic, Martech IT versus marketing thing. That's fine, we can do that if you like. And I fully appreciate that in some organisations that's the world that you live in, and it really is a bit of a turf war between skills. And if that's the case, and I've worked in companies like that, there's nothing wrong with it, then it's really a question of When it comes to new skills typically that are required by marketing, new freedoms and speed that marketing want to have, you've only really got two choices. You can either federate and educate, i.e. you can go to your technology people and make sure that they are much more aware and crystal clear about how it is they need to change, and that's a successful strategy. Typically, long term, it works better. But typically it's hard yards, and typically you've got to get, again, 90 days, do I believe in that? No. Maybe 90 months is more realistic to make that kind of change. Or you can duplicate and replicate, and there's nothing wrong with that either. So you can say, well, we're going to bolt this new team onto marketing, we're going to call it e-digital or e-marketing or e-something. Typically it used to be in the 90s, it tends to be digital something these days, which is essentially a replication of things that were traditionally done by IT. They're all valid strategies. My only comment really would be as leaders, be very clear which one you're trying to do. They're all valid, everything's valid, but just going in there vaguely moaning about IT and IT resisting any change is probably not a healthy place to be. As a set of leaders, really thinking through how you're going to meet the needs of good, fast and cheap all at the same time in some mix is really what you're trying to achieve.
Charles, thanks for that kind of message, working together, the realities of some of our organisations. Something you mentioned there that just triggered a thought in my mind is this is about people. This is about getting the right talent into our organisations, whether it's technology people or people with forward-thinking, progressive marketing techniques. I'd be interested in the panel's view in terms of how we're finding the right people and the challenges that we're facing into that. Did Tom just pick up on that?
We were talking about this just before the panel started, about getting people in with the right skills, people that are bright and young. But most of the time you sit in an organization with old legacy processes, procedures and structures, and that's the first thing you need to overcome if you want to be more agile in your recruitment, if you want to get better talent in. And then you need to approach your HR and functions or recruitment agents with a very specific brief on which talents you actually require, and be very precise in your questions and answers during your recruitment process.
Good point. John, do you want
We'll share the mic. I don't know, maybe I'm just, I apologise for this, but isn't that, we're living in a different world. I mean, the people I work with, the generations of the 90s, born in the 90s, and the kids I'm seeing growing up today who are the IT gurus of the future and the marketing gurus of the future. When I've got a 3-year-old, I haven't got 3-year-old, a friend of mine has, that swipes the television screen, I know life's changed. So, I think that people are growing up now, that the new generation are growing up in a fully integrated world already. And in fact, their expectations of what it means to be employed in an organization are so integrated that our old style approach of being somewhat compartmentalized, I think, is gone. So I think we need to look at a different way of recruiting people and thinking about recruiting people. And I totally agree. I think there's a kind of disintermediation in the way that organizations are now structured, where the skills that you might have thought were just IT in the past can perfectly validly be operating in the operations function or in distribution or in wherever. And I think that this new generation of screen swipers, and particularly working in China, where there's an app, there is literally an app for everything. In fact, kids will leave on a Friday. They won't tell us that they've left work. They'll just leave. And on Monday, they've set up some kind of app operation somewhere in Shenzhen that's about to earn 16 million because Alibaba think they're good. It's an astonishing change, and the speed of change and the speed of demand of younger people, I think is really going to put pressure on us to think very differently about recruitment and about what it means to work for an organisation.
Charles, just before you answer, I would like to open it up to the audience. So I'll give Charles a chance to respond to the question. But if I could ask you just to think of a question, if you put your hand up, you've got the roving bring it round. So if you just give some thought to that. Charles, do you want to pick up the discussion?
Okay, so there's one word I put into this is the need for diversity, really. I don't believe that I want to live in an organisation dominated by millennials who are bright and ambitious and free-willed and all that. I don't think that will make a successful organisation. Neither do I think that the persistence of fat, bold, middle-aged blokes like me running, I was just speaking for myself, careful, whoops, is the right thing either. So, you know, diversity has, unfortunately, in my view, been reduced to a thing about sexuality or you know, racial diversity, and I think actually that's part of it, but not the important thing. The important thing is understanding that you've got a group of people working inside teams that have different contexts. And it's the context word that's really important for me, so the social diversity as well as all those other things. I appreciate we all measure, you know, Einstein never said it, but apparently he's attributed to saying it, you know, we tend to make the measurable important as opposed to the important measurable, and unfortunately that's what typically HR, or we've done inside HR in the diversity issue. So for me it's all about diversity, and in there it brings some problems. You've got, fundamentally, if I have to look, clearly it's a heterogeneous quantum, it's not a binary, but I'll express it as a binary, two ends of a very complex chain. And if you look at that chain, you have got fat, bald, middle-aged blokes like me that want predictability, aren't comfortable with uncertainty, like to think that they can plan through the next 5 years, and think all those things have a degree of truth. They want to control IT because they've seen problems with legacy, with rogue IT, and you know, projects they've had to come up and clean up after somebody else is, with all best intent, gone and spent a load of company money on it. You know, so we've all been there. So that's a valid context. Should it be replaced like a pendulum swinging to the other view, where actually it's fine, everything in the cloud, do what you like, here's a load of money, spend a load? Clearly not. So both of those are simplistic, too simplistic. However, how do you attract the millennials? How do you get on top of cloud IT? Fundamentally, it comes back to this starting to be comfortable, typically middle-aged, fat old blokes, becoming comfortable, more comfortable with handing people problems to solve, not specifications to deliver, a reasonable budget and a reasonable time, and being open to doing things very differently. And if you're successful at doing that as a leader, then I think the millennials, we found anyway, we get a plethora actually of people that, I'm not going to get into the politics of pay reforms in the civil service, but you'll all be aware there hasn't really been any since 2008. Despite that, we are getting unbelievable numbers of very bright young people who could quite happily go and work in finance or some other very well-paid job in London, are choosing to come to us because it's all part of the ethic. You know, I think we've got plenty of evidence recently with two big votes that, again, I won't go into, that people are not particularly, well, all people aren't particularly comfortable with the old ways of the world. The world has changed. And we as leaders, again, have to respond to that change. So if you want to be attractive to young people and you want them to stay, you've got to be more liberal in your outlook. You've got to give them a problem to solve. You've got to give them the tools and the skills to solve it and the freedoms to solve it. And that is tricky because us fat, old, middle-aged blokes aren't always wrong. The need to do that in a planned and progressive way is also important.
I'm glad you got that off your chest, Charles. I'll just hand over to some questions from the floor there. I see a hand up in the...
John touched on the whole piece of the cybersecurity elements. Interesting coming from someone from China. I don't know whether that's equally applicable to the other members of the panel, and whether a CIO role sees themselves in charge of cybersecurity, or do they have a CISO role, do they view it as constrained, or do they take it as something that's an enabling capability that needs to be integrated right from the start?
I think my approach, I think, is generally and genuinely to try to find a much better way of ensuring that everybody understands what needs to be done. Cybersecurity is clearly one aspect of the gamut of things that we need to deal with. And I'm not saying it's overplayed, because I think it's very, very important. But in the question I keep asking of anybody who listen is, with what purpose? So, you know, what is the purpose that we're all doing what we're doing? And I would go back to the organization's strategy. And I think that's the place to start for all of us. And all too often, and I've spent my life doing this, all too often when you talk to organizations at the highest level, they don't know. They're not sure what the long-term strategy is for the organization. And I say that advisedly, because clearly a lot of people do. So I do think it's absolutely beholden on CIOs, CMOs, what we used to call HR, but people and culture, to actually work together to ensure that we're very clear about what the strategy of the organization is, what's the long-term approach, and then you can put everything that you need to put in the context of that strategy. So I may not be answering your question, but I think it's a really, really critical issue, and I spent a long time battling to put marketing at the boardroom level, and I think that's super important, and that it is absolutely appropriate that we should have a fully diverse approach to that. But when we get there, we have to take our responsibilities, not just as IT or as CMOs, but as a board.
Another question? I'll take the question from the front here.
You mentioned what was important being measurable, and you talked there about the purpose. I would expect John would be able to answer this. It'd be interesting to see whether you know the answer, which is what do you measure your marketing efforts? How do you measure your marketing efforts? Is it leads generated? Is it conversion? Is it revenue? Or is it the price you can charge versus comparable competitors, the premium price, or the amount investors will invest compared to the normal multiples of profit? How do you measure your marketing? And I'm sort of looking at John, but I'd be interested to know whether you, I think you're the IT side, would actually know how marketing are measured. So that was my question, and you may have an answer as well, obviously.
Do you want to pick up on that one? Or
How long is a piece of string?
Thank you.
There are lots of ways of measuring marketing, but I would actually say the one thing we really focus on, and you might think this is odd for a bunch of accountants, is NPS. So we're very interested in Net Promoter Scores. And we're very interested in understanding from a consumer point of view what keeps and what stops a consumer or a client from working with us. So our one utter focus, if we're ruled by one number, which increasingly we believe we should be, it's 9. I'd like 10s, but a kind of 9. I'd love 9 point something, but 9. And we are working increasingly hard around the world to ensure that that's where we're focusing our attention. Because if we're 9s, everything else will follow. That's a real change in our organisation. Clearly, we're not the big four, the Deloittes, the KPMGs of this world. I used to work at PwC. But we believe that in order to compete in a marketplace that's very, very tough, that we have to do something different. So our whole effort is around, we know exactly what we're about, we know exactly who we're focusing on, and we measure the effectiveness by what are our customers telling us. That's a fundamentally different way of looking at things. And then everything else kind of comes up behind that. So then, yes, we're interested in dwell rates on the guys that are interested in that stuff. We're interested in, return on asset value for guys who are interested in that stuff. But all those are less important than what's the consumer saying.
Thank you, John. DT?
So, as far as I understand from our marketing team, for e-commerce, they would look at dwell rates and pass-throughs and click-throughs and how many people buy tickets and how many people buy upsells for restaurants and stuff. For marketing efforts, before any event or race day, it is people that come in, new people that's never been there before, how successful it was, and also how many people return for a next event. So if you look at Royal Ascot, there's about 300,000 people come every year for Royal Ascot, and 90% of those people only come to Ascot on that event. Then they don't come in any other event. So this year, we've increased the amount of people that come from Royal Ascot to the next event by about 5%, which is a huge success for us. And then, the retention rate and new business is a big marketing measurement for us.
I mean, one of the things that I've seen that the merging of technology and marketing brings is more measurements and more KPIs, and you were mentioning some of them there. To the question, I guess, and it'd be interesting your views, I guess now we've got more points of measurement going on to various technology websites, CRM systems, retention, that sort of thing. Are you finding the fact that we've now got technology and marketing coming together, there's more measurement, more points of measurement and more ways of actually assessing the effectiveness of marketing? Just ask you that question.
Sure. I sort of haven't got there yet. We haven't got our measures where I'd like them to be. But I do worry about doing too much measurement here of things that I want to separate the measurements that matter from the means to the end. So for me, a dwell rate is interesting. But what's the benchmark? Unless I can see what the competitors have got, unless I can see what an industry benchmark is, I don't know whether I'm looking at a good number or not. So I've always insisted, like all of you, you get 1 million emails every day from people wanting to sell you stuff. If you can't show me why a direct line to revenue, I don't care what advertising it is, what event it is, I'm not interested.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. On the floor? Yes, Richard. You want to take the microphone?
It was really just to pick up a point that Charles was discussing earlier on about the his archetypal, fat old middle-aged bloke, and the millennials coming in. There is a formal process that's been long established, known as mentoring, in which the older, more experienced players go through a formal process to help the younger, newer players come on board. That's also adjustable, and I've had good experience of it, by turning it into reverse mentoring, in which you create the environment in which the younger millennials, etc., are encouraged to get into an environment where they upward mentor, if you like, to the flat old blokes who need to understand. You have to create a culture where mentoring and reverse mentoring works, but it is a formal process, and it can be used very effectively now.
Good point, Richard. Thank you. I've got time to take one more question very quickly. The gentleman at the back there. I was going to come to the gentleman, yeah.
Hello. So actually mine's not so much a question, it's just really listening to all the points here, because I'm a FTSE CIO. I very much agree with the diversity bit. So from my background, I've been doing solutions to business problems, understanding the business side and the technology side. So some of the questions from Charles, I've got a good marketing background. Some of the questions from the gentleman at the front, absolutely from my role, I'm actually like the CTO as well, and almost head of security, so I don't have the CSO title. So I'm just really re-impressing, I think, the diversity of skill set, not just in an individual person as a CIO role and CMO working together, but also the diversity in the team. I think the gentleman at the front's very well made. You need to listen from the younger guys who, they've got the kids with the swipes, so even though I'm in my mid-40s, I know some of the other guys can bring things, and the lady who left, I've also got a good range of strong techies who are females in my team. I'd encourage them as well. So really it's just agreeing with, I think the key point is diversity and breadth of role, people working together to establish a means. I think that's important, really.
Thank you for that. Well, look, we've come right to the end. Thank you for your participation. I'd like you to just put your hands together and for a round of applause for the DT John.